Here we are in Unity, and let's make our 2D character jump. It's kind of frustrating because it sounds simple, but there's a few steps to this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my player. Right? I already have horizontal movement. I do want to point out a few things. Make sure you have a capsule collider, or a collider and a rigid body. So my objects that I am jumping on and or off of have rigid bodies, right? So the mountain thing or whatever, the ground, and the tower and my player. Here's the collider here. Now, my player doesn't have legs, but keep in mind, I'm going to keep him this distance above, so he'll still be able to jump. He's just never going to fully land, and that's because I didn't animate legs for this guy. He floats. That being said, let's go ahead and dive into the code of this. So once you have rigid bodies and colliders, what you need here is just the original code I am using for left and right movement. But let's go ahead. I'm going to separate this out with a void jump function. Whoops. Caps lock jump function. All right. And what we'll be putting in that is, well, a few things. It's going to be code to make them jump. Ah, yes. Unity, capital letter for a function. Got it. So I'm going to start with an if input dot get button down, and this is all native to Unity. Jump. Okay. What jump will be are the keys that Unity associates with jump. So you can edit and change those. However, I'm just going to use it as is, which is the spacebar. So jump. Now, what do I want to actually change when my player is jumping? Well, I'm going to go ahead and do get component rigid body 2D. Okay. Get component rigid body 2D. And then I want to add force. Now, once I write add force, I need to create a new vector 2 to assign the rigid body to, right? Where is my rigid body going to be going? So obviously for X, it's 0, right? There's not going to be left or right movement in this situation. And then the height I want them to jump is, well, up to you. I normally put this up here as a float so I can change my mind a bunch, but actually I'm going to do that. Float. I'm going to make it private. You could make it public if you want it in the inspector. So public jump height, I'll call it. And I'm going to set this equal to, let's try 5F, because we're going to make it a float. Oops. All right. There we are. So, and now I can just write down here, jump height. Okay. So the last thing we're going to need is comma force mode 2D, right? And then impulse. Pull this. Now what this force mode 2D impulse does, first of all, it applies the force immediately, but keep in mind it is contingent, it is dependent upon the actual mass of the player, the object you're moving. Apparently I misspelled height. And what's this saying? Oh, yep, I missed. So the vector 2 is just going to be right here, and this is explaining the application of the force. So there we are, and this is looking good. Let's go ahead and make sure to save. All right, let's just make sure to call this up here. There we are. Let me save all that. Okay, let's give this a shot. And over, and there we are. Now, you're probably seeing the problem right now, right? I can keep jumping while in air, which is fine for some games, but my alien is in space. Now, we could just apply a ton of gravity, but that has other potential issues. So right now, what's my gravity? My gravity skill is at 6. What if I put it at 2? Let's try that. Yeah, right? So now it's kind of harder to get them to do this, but that's not a real solution. It's kind of a band-aid on it. So what we want to do, the easiest way that I have found to do this is actually to add another game object. And I'm going to add this within or as part of our player object. So I'm going to click on the player object and say create empty. I'm going to call this, I guess, on ground. Sure. On ground. What I want to add to my on ground is a collider. So I'm just going to do perfect, a box collider. Let me take a look at where this is. Oh, I'm in game. Oh, there we are. So here's my box collider. Let's move it first. And then I'm going to edit it so it spreads out under the character. Now I'm going to put mine where I would want the legs to be. How high I want him to hover, right? So if you have legs on your character, which you most likely do, you would want to place yours at the feet. So let me just see. That is looking great. So on ground. Okay. Now, what we can do with this, and that's all we're going to need for it. The other thing I'm going to add, though, is a ground or on ground script. And let's create that. We just move it into a good folder here. On ground. All right. So this needs a few things in it as well. We're going to go ahead and say game object player. And we can do that because it is all part of that same structure. On start, we're going to do player equals game object dot transform dot parent dot game object. Okay. Oh, we don't need these. All right. So perfect. Game objects transform parent game object. Now what we're going to want here is we won't need an update for this. So I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye. What we will need though is let's do a private void on collision 2D enter. So when they enter, when our on ground collider enters another object, so if collision dot collider dot tag, I'm going to use is equal to ground, we'll say, or rock, or icy surface, or a moon, or whatever. Okay, collision dot, and I missed an equals. Oh, right. So now, if it is equal to that, what do I want to have happen? Well, player dot get component. Oh, I haven't added this yet. We'll add it. Get component. Get the player script. And what are we going to be doing? Well, I'm going to use a Boolean. I'm going to make a Boolean called on platform or on ground and set it equal to true. So where's our player script here? I'm going to make this public so I can access it from our other script. And I'm going to call it on platform and set it equal to true. Or, yeah, it can be true at first. Public, oops, bool. All right, so there we are there with that. I don't need these because it's a variable. This is going to be used to detect when we are supposed to jump or when the player should be able to. Now, the other part of this is one last function, not within this one. We're done with this one. And that's for on exit because we need to know when they are off the ground as well. Okay, so on exit, meaning the collider for our ground thing left. What do we want to have happen then? Oh, well then we're going to say player.get component player script. So same deal, right? We are going to use this same variable from our player script. We're going to grab it and set it equal to false because they are no longer on the ground. And we're going to use this collider and this script to set true or false if they are on the ground or not. The second that my on ground collider leaves, it's going to say, oop, on exit, right? Collision exited, so false. And what are we going to do with that info? Well, on platform, I'm going to put it down here in my jump function. So they can jump if they did the jump input and if on platform is true. Well, when is on platform going to be true? If and only if they're on the ground, if that collider is still in contact with the ground. Okay, so let me save all that. That's it. And then the last thing we need to make sure to do is here's my platform. Remember, I got to change the tag because that's how I know if I'm touching it, right? Or I'm changing my tag here to ground. Collision.collider tag is equal to ground. So here's my platform. Here's my platform. I'm going to add a new tag, and whatever's the tags, I already have a character one, but I want a ground one. And I'm going to hit save. Now keep in mind, I'm going to click wherever. When I go back to this, it has not been given that tag. I now have to select it. Okay, so now let's give this a shot. And I, if you're hearing, cannot do a billion jumps. I have to land before I jump again. Success. Awesome. I hope you create a marvelous jumpy game.